blame them. I had it coming to me.
All right. Good evening, Catholic YouTube. Brian with City of the Immaculata back with you. December 1st, 2025, the year of our Lord. Who thought we'd ever make it this far? I certainly never did. I had many times where there were doubts. I had some friends that didn't make it. Not to be maudlin. It's a reflective time of year for me. It always is for some reason. The cold, the darkness, something about all of that just gets me to be very, very reflective this time of year. Speaking of reflective, I wanted to share this with you guys. I don't know how well you guys will be able to see this. This is a St. Maximilian Kolbe rosary. And would you believe that somebody who I've never met before picked this up for me? I'm amazed. I'm amazed at people. Humanity never ceases to amaze me. There's always been a part of me. I keep going back as a young man, as a little boy, who the urge to be a misanthrope, to be a curmudgeon, to be a pessimist, and That would be easy to do were it not for people. People always come along, and you know, I I'm just in awe of people sometimes. This is a person I've never met before, and here they had the wherewithal to stop thinking about, someone they've never met before, picking up a rosary. They knew I have a special devotion to St. Maximilian Kolbe. They touched this rosary of St. Maximilian Kolbe to a first class relic of his, which we don't have many, and sent it to me in the mail. And yeah, it's very, very moving, very touching, and makes me feel inadequate for how little I stop to think about others that are outside my immediate sphere of influence. But there was a saying from St. Therese of Lisieux who said, if we make it to heaven, you'll never pass anyone as a stranger. We'll realize how much we all had to rely on each other. And I know I'm going to have to rely on a lot of you guys to make it, to get there to the other end. I'll tell you, the other thing that gives me hope for humanity on a little bit of a positive note is watching this footage of Pope Leo in Lebanon. Not so much the Pope himself, though I do have to say I admire and respect Pope Leo the 14th quite a bit, but the response of the Lebanese people has just been it's been something. It's been amazing. I was watching a little bit of it right before I hopped on here, watching it on the TV and seeing the Lebanese people, Catholic, I assume some non-Catholic in there, Orthodox, Muslim, probably secular, all alike, kind of come together and rally around a man who's clearly someone who, if nothing else, if you disagree with him religiously, you can't deny his conviction that he's a man who desires peace in a region of the world that isn't guaranteed that day to day, especially right now. So I see quite a few of you have joined. So without further ado, with further ado, first, before I forget, go over, follow my Patreon channel. If you can, consider becoming a paying member. It helps the channel out a lot. It's a war of attrition over there, I tell you. I did a 7-part series on is it still running? No, I don't think it's still running. It's still there to be seen. I think the last of the videos is out now. So you will, for the $5 a month tier, get 7 fantastic, in my opinion, probably the best work I've ever done, videos on what I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek calling the errors of Eastern Orthodoxy, though it's just a little bit of my critique of Orthodoxy as such. And I think it's stuff that you're not really finding anywhere else. You're not likely to find anywhere else. And besides that, we're also doing a book club of Rebuild My Church, which is we're going to pick that back up next week. And that's covering, like I said, Rebuild My Church, which is going to go through the theology of Father Peter Fellner. And he's a very Orthodox Franciscan theologian, one of the best, certainly of modernity. So go check those out. Well, I'll be picking up, I've got another series that I'm going to be doing starting in the new year, and it's going to be on, loosely speaking, I'm formulating the series of lectures in my mind right now, but it's going to be the historical and theological relationship of the Jews and the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, in specific the High Middle Ages and the Late Middle Ages. And again, I think it's a very important subject, one that I see a lot of Catholics get wrong. They tend to read the Jews simply through the lens of, honestly, modernity and post-modernity, without considering what the historic view of the Catholic Church was. So we're going to be covering that, probably 3 or 4 videos, pretty in depth, starting in January. So that's going to be over on Patreon. Check that out. Now, without further ado, let me get back to the topic at hand today. And I want to begin today with a song. a song by the Rolling Stones. I'm actually not going to play the song because then they're liable to yank my video. But I would like to read some of the lyrics to you guys. This is actually, this is a song by the Rolling Stones, and it is the first concert that I ever went to as a child. I was such a child, in fact, that I was in utero. My mother was pregnant with me, and she went to a Rolling Stones concert a very long time ago. So I got to hear them. I may even have heard them at this concert, unbeknownst to very young me, heard them play this song. I was watching something the other day. I can't remember what it was, and it's like a movie or something. And this song started playing, and I had been thinking about what I was going to discuss today. And as the song was playing, it kind of hit me that there's some relationships to what the lyrics of this song are talking about and what I wanted to discuss today. So the song is called Sympathy for the Devil. Now, as the title suggests, it is kind of cringe boomer 60s, you know, edgy in its day, but now it becomes more of a like, what were they thinking? As it ages, it doesn't age so well. I mean, it's not a terrible song. It's as far as a song writing goes, it's like a 1-5-2 chord progression, I think. Nothing special. But there's some very, very interesting lines in the song. And Mick Jagger, I think it's Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are the songwriters, and he's singing about a very interesting theme, which let me read to you some of the lines. And bear in mind, as he's singing the beginning of these lines, the title of the song gives it away, but were the song just to be played on the radio and you didn't know the title, he's not disclosing who he is. He's just giving hints. So it says, quoting the song, I was round when Jesus Christ had his moments of doubt and pain. I made damn sure that Pilate washed his hands and sealed his fate. I stuck around St. Petersburg when I saw it was time for change. We killed the Tsar and his ministers. Anastasia screamed in vain. I rode a tank, held a general's rank, when the blitzkrieg raged and the bodies stank. Pleased to meet you. I hope you guess my name. Now, I think about evil a lot. I think anyone probably with a little bit more than the simplest of reflective intuition and a sense of the spiritual journey that we're all on as living human beings probably does think about it. I think about it a lot. I think about evil in the malevolent sense, the evil that we inflict on each other intentionally. I think about evil in the stupid sense, what I call it, the fire that happened when I was a young boy. It carried away my 18-year-old uncle. It carried away my great-grandmother. It almost carried away all of us. It almost carried away me as well. And I think it actually has something to do with why I've always been so reflective on death, mortality, the stupidity of evil. And one of the things that I've noticed about Christians is, as someone who was raised around somebody that was only people that were only nominally Christian, my dad, my grandparents, his parents they were raised Baptist, but they never went to church. My dad never went to church. I think my dad's coming around a little bit here later in life with some of the struggles that he's had. And I think he's been attending church regularly. So prayers for him. His name is Brian as well. My mother converted to Catholicism when I was about 10 years old. I didn't really have any kind of conversion until later in life. And I had always been kind of a spectator of Christians, a observer of Christians. And for the longest time, and I still think there's some truth to this, I think that Christians, a lot of the Christians that I've met, I don't want to say that they have an incorrect view of evil. It's not that it's incorrect. Rather, I think it's in many ways incomplete. And that's not a fault of Christianity as such. It hasn't always been this way. Not that I can ascertain. I mean, it does seem, early on in Christian history, all the way up through the Middle Ages, in fact, that Christians had a very good grasp on evil. And then somewhere in the early modern period, we switched to witch hunts and boogeymen. And I think that many people today have this view in mind when they think of evil. They tend to think of something that just goes bump in the night. Now, I'm not one that's going to sit here and deny that there aren't things that actually go bump in the night. I don't deny that there are. We talked last week about a golden thread, the thread that unites the Franciscan Order across the ages. And we said that this thread, according to a Franciscan friar in the early 20th century, you may have heard of St. Maximilian Kolbe. He said that this golden thread, borrowing from another Franciscan theologian, was Our Lady as Immaculata in particular. But this week, I want to talk about a different thread, a darker thread, and I really want to make sure that I'm articulate enough to express what it is that I'm trying to convey. The 5 people watching this, my five listeners, all 5 of you, I want to make sure that I'm able to express exactly what it is that I want to say to you. I don't think I would have to try as hard as I normally would were we in different times. But I do think that in a sense, a lot of people have an incomplete view of evil that I wanted to add a little bit here to the conversation. Sometimes when something is in the past, it's hard to grasp the significance of that thing. And we are in many ways like so far removed from death, from killing. We don't even kill our food anymore. Even illness to an extent has been outsourced. Except sometimes that comes knocking on the door very hard for a lot of us. But for the most part, a lot of people are able to forget it to degrees that people in the past were not able to. I think some people, the only way to make the world livable for them is to kind of drown out at times the very oppressive noise of that kind of stupid evil that exists in the world, let alone the malevolent kind. That's how we function in the West. That's how we make this consumerist world possible, is to make the inconvenient untidiness of death as remote a thing as possible. And in the West, we've done a remarkably good job of that. I mean, sometimes when I'm thinking of evil, I think back to these images that I've seen. I forget where I first ran across these, but in the UK, in the United Kingdom in the 19th century, right as photography was coming into existence, child mortality rates were skyrocketing. They were just astronomically high. No one was exempt from it either. Child mortality came for the rich, it came for the poor. And there was this theme where parents in the 19th century in the UK would dress and prop up their deceased infants in these photos. And man, when I saw that, when I first ran across that, it's been years now wherever I ran across it, it still haunts me to this day. Not even just the death of the child, which is hard enough, right? But the idea of those parents and that pain trying to navigate this, the like sorrow of this world, drowning in it, using this new medium of photography to try to capture something of the essence of this life that's no more, the innocence of it, it sits with me. It's like 10, 15 years later, wherever I first saw those images, and how far removed we are from all of that. And yes, I mean, we still know people who tragically lose their children, but this was a common occurrence at this time. These were hundreds of photos that I saw of just these deceased infants dressed in gowns, dressed in the best clothes. I mean, it was only wealthy parents who could afford to do this, but still, they would dress them up in like gorgeous gowns and prop them up. And I used to walk back in Richmond, Virginia. There's a really great cemetery. It's called Hollywood Cemetery. If you're ever in Richmond, Virginia, trust me, you want to go to this cemetery. I took my then girlfriend, dating wife, soon to be wife, on a date there to Hollywood Cemetery. If you're from Richmond, Virginia, you don't need to be told why you would do that. Anybody else, you kind of have to, like, why would you take a date to Hollywood Cemetery? But there is the beauty of the old headstones at that cemetery. I used to walk around there. I would go to college at VCU. I parked right next to where Hollywood Cemetery is. I would go through the main gate. There was different sections. There's like a Civil War section where it's just littered with the bodies that they were bringing back from the North, of all these Civil War soldiers. And then you walk around and you would see these very ornate, very gorgeous headstones of like a little tiny bed and a child like kneeling and praying on the bed. And you can kind of sense as you're walking up to those what you're about to walk up to. And of course, it would be a very short life. But I think about that. I think about that evil that those parents endured and what the sorrow and the pain of that loss was to them, that they here 100, 200 years later were still walking by and remembering what otherwise would have been just a lost child. Now, before I get too far into this, I do want to speak on this notion of 100 years of Satan being let loose on the earth. The traditionalists love this story, and I think it's because many of them want a very simple narrative. Actually, first, let me talk about narratives. I think that's going to be the first thing to talk about. Human history is very complex. Parceling out where in history evil has resided is not always the easiest thing to do, believe it or not. But as humans, we have an almost demand for the simplest of narratives as possible, at least at a collective level. And look, I'm not here to dissuade anyone of a good yarn told to get across simply and directly some moral truth. That's what's needed for many people. And if the moral truth is accessed through those tales, through those simple tales, through those nursery rhymes and those types of things, then fantastic. Tolkien was aware of this. There's always been an academic bias against Tolkien that despises him because of this very reason. They kind of haughtily say, like, oh, those like Tolkien novels like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are dime store trash novels dressed up. This isn't art. No, we need nuance and complexity and moral ambiguity. And honestly, this is the flaw of modern Hollywood as well, too. After the 1960s, they started making morally ambiguous movies. And movies, Hollywood movies, it's not that they haven't made fantastic movies. In some ways, they make really fantastic movies. But when you make them morally ambiguous, then you wonder why they don't have the charm of those earlier movies. It's because in those earlier movies, they were speaking more to that Tolkien type sense of storytelling. Tolkien in those old Hollywood movies said, no, people have an innate desire to see the dragons as evil, the small, frail man, the underdog, as the hero. They have a desire and a right to see a world where justice is justice and truth is truth and so on. And This is a very winning combo every single time. Hint, if you want to write a fantastic story, follow that narrative and people will unabashedly be drawn to it. Deep down, the human race is a very optimistic race. We're a very optimistic species. You know, we do things for others that we've never met before, that we're never going to meet before. Now, sometimes whether that optimism is deserved, I'm not so sure. I have my doubts at times. I think that Christians reside, our paradigmatic scope of the world resides on hope more than on optimism. But I'm not so sure that those old fairy tales don't have some real validity to them. But yeah, we desire the clarity of the message. It's Chesterton's, it's Ethics of Elfland. As an oral species where the spoken word helps to carry and sustain the tribe down through the centuries and the generations, like we need that. We need simple, effective rhetorical storytelling to make universal truths present to the person that's sitting there. Not everyone can sit down and read Plato's Republic, unfortunately. But if I can convey the truths that these people argued over for centuries in a simple tale of a young, simple hero that goes out and slays a dragon, then how many people are changed for the better because of that? But the trade-off is, getting back to my point, sorry for my tangents, the trade-off is that that need takes what are actually in reality very complex topics and simplifies them for mass consumption by the very nature of it. That's what they do. So I also don't think that it should be the only thing that we're engaged in when it comes to moralized storytelling. Sometimes you need a few well-trained people. I guess emphasis on a few. You're never going to have very many. My 5 followers out there, you guys will understand what I'm talking about, who go a little bit deeper, who go past just what's superficial on the surface of some of the things that we're talking about, especially as it relates to history and history as a science. So while I do think there is something in this particular story, I also think we need to be careful how we read it. And that's exactly how I want to kind of analyze it. It would be a much broader topic than what I can give you guys, unfortunately, in an hour and some lecture. But the gist of the actual story is pretty simple. What happens is Pope Leo the 13th, this would have been 1880s, 1884, after finishing Mass, he has a vision of Christ granting Satan 100 years of free reign over the earth. Now, I have seen so much commentary on this, usually by traditionalist Catholics, and the way that they go about it is it kind of gets right at the problem that I have with the sometimes oversimplified storytelling. Because typically what they'll do is they'll come up with these like preconceived views that of what this 100-year reign of Satan actually entails. And then they take those preconceived views and they proceed to use events that happened as like, they use those preconceived ideas as pretexts for application to events as they happen, is what I'm trying to say. And I mean, the most obvious glaring example of that would probably be Vatican II, right? You have varying degrees of acceptance or rejection of Vatican II by the traditionalist community, but you will undoubtedly come across those who see the council and its aftermath as a sign of the reign of Satan over the church. Bearing in mind they have already have this interior suspicion of the council before they even use this Leonine apparition as their pretext. But that's just one of the oversimplified uses of a much more complex history that say between 1884 and 1984, if we're actually looking at it as a 100-year reign. Often you see this used as proof that the church apostatized, that it failed in faith and morals, especially in the 1960s at Vatican II in the aftermath of the council, which I explicitly and wholeheartedly deny that pretext. I deny that reading of the history. I think that Vatican II was actually a godsend in the truest sense of the word. It was a godsend council. Now, that doesn't mean that it hadn't been hijacked afterwards in certain ways and certain readings of it, hermeneutics, and there's a lot of work to do, blah, 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 blah. We know. So yeah, I am on Team Vatican II all day, all the way. Yet at the same time, there is something that happened between the time that Leo had this vision and, I don't know, roughly, say, 1984. Some serious societal changes took place. And I don't believe that, we can read history void of providence. I've been thinking about this a lot for the simple fact that the book group that we're going to do next week, we're going to talk about a Franciscan reading of history. And so I've been thinking about, providence in history and a sort of historiography and how we read history and these types of things. And I have my own things that I'm thinking about of this 100-year period, reading history as under the reign of some kind of diabolical forces. I think it's clear to anyone that studies the history of that time that something bad happened. As we turn from the century that Pope Leo himself had this vision to the 20th century, and what do we see? We see war on a scale unprecedented in human history. We see, even though there had been severe social upheavals in many ways, many of the seeds planted in the 19th century, well, the chicken came home to roost in the 20th century. Societal upheaval and mass instability on scales that were unprecedented even for the 19th century. We see technological advances on scales unprecedented. You begin the century with horse and buggy. You end the century with ships on the moon. At one point, we actually had to start concerning ourselves with technology that could wipe out all of all of life on Earth. It truly was. It's a century of man against man, man against science, science against man against nature. It's quite staggering, actually, to think about the 20th century in many ways. We see almost the complete and total secularization, the overhaul and secularization of Western civilization. Western Christian civilization is almost completely gutted in the course of 100 years. From one side by the Bolshevik communists in the East, and from the other side by this kind of consumerist Americanism that was the other dominant force of this period. And they're both at war with one another, and you're supposed to choose sides in that battle. And while the Bolsheviks ultimately failed by the 1990s, the Americanist consumerist experiment still threatens to undermine the faith of millions of people. So this is one of those areas where I think we are often guilty of special pleading, because communism was so just blatantly evil, almost a caricature of evil. The Gulag as the apex of man's crimes against man, the sort of caricature of Bolshevik inhumanity. But because we were the victors of that conflict, of that period, our side, I don't think we often appreciate the failures of our own culture. I think we're starting to appreciate them now. I think the chickens are coming home to roost on the other side now. The product of mass Western secularization is, now that it's combined with a rampant access to technology we never thought imaginable, manifesting as a complete and total inversion of the good. So, sympathy for the devil. Just as every cop is a criminal and all the sinners are saints, is the line in that song. Just as every cop is a criminal and all the sinners saints. I think that line sums up kind of nicely the evils of our own day. Everything seems to be inverted. Our entire ethical system has been inverted, not by the godless Bolsheviks, mind you, but by the once God-fearing West. Who would have predicted that coming? Everything that was good is now evil. Everything that was evil is now good. Just as every cop is a criminal, now all the sinners are saints. Think about that church shooting just a few months ago. What even was that? A terminally online transgender Nazi, like Nietzschean nihilist who wanted to murder as many children as possible, specifically while they were attending Mass, specifically at a parish that was associated with his mother's names. Think about that. That's not an evil that goes like just bump in the night. That's different. A transgendered Nazi nihilist murders children at Mass at the parish that his mother worked at. Like, that's layers of evil. That's a deep, dark, cold malevolence that transcends even the evil of Bolshevism. I'm sorry. The Bolsheviks, for all of their wrongdoing, at least convinced themselves that they were doing something for some greater cause. This is more like an Ivanian evil. Think of Dostoevsky's. He writes this scene in The Brothers Karamazov where Ivan recounts all of the torturous ways that people have been killed, and he mostly recounts the torture and death of children. As a rhetorical device, though, Dostoevsky made sure that the examples that he gave drew from real life stories. So Ivan is recounting these tales to his naive brother, the religious Alexei, and there's one in there, the story of this little girl that was abused by her parents, and they've locked her in the outhouse. And it's like this time of year. It's dark, it's cold, it stinks in the outhouse. And she's striking her breast, and she's just begging the Lord forgive her. Forgive her for whatever she's done to deserve this treatment, this punishment that the Lord is meting out on her. Ivan says, explain that kind of evil to me. And that's the kind of evil that I think in some ways that we have as when we have this incomplete picture of evil. When we think about evil as just something that goes bump in the night. In the West, really, for decades, think about the masses of bodies that piled up in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia. Think about the kind of evil where you're a young Frenchman or a young German boy sitting in a trench talking to your buddy when suddenly your buddy's face gets blown off by a shrapnel shell that you never heard coming, and then it blows your eardrums out. You never hear another word again in your life. Think about Kennedy being shot and killed in front of families and little children, having his head blown off in front of his wife. Think about the fact that we almost saw that again, seeing Trump. Think of how close we were to having the president of the United States, soon to be elected, former president and soon to be elected again presidents, brains blown all over our computer screens. I think about the Columbine killers quite a bit. They were a little bit older than me, but close enough to my age that I think about that a lot. I think about their cold, calculated way that they just wanted to cause death and destruction for no other stated reason than to see people hurt. I read Cullen's Columbine. I know what the story is. It wasn't the trench coat mafia of kids that were just convinced by the music that they were listening to. There was something way more sinister going on there. Columbine, by the way, comes after the year 1984, by the way. So even if this were a 100-year loose reigning of Satan upon the world, what the hell was that? That was 1999. September 11th, not long after that. Wars in the Middle East were left millions of people dead and the Christian churches decimated. Are we like out of that 100-year reign because we're past 1984? Is it like did some new deal made that we missed or something? Even the evil sometimes that you see going again back to the 20th century, the Bolsheviks, the communist worldwide movements that happened all around the world, masses of bodies piled up. Sure, it was evil. It was the other great evil that we faced. But it at least had a evil that was tied to it that had some kind of you couldn't like justify it, but you could explain it. For the Columbine kids, and I think they're in many ways they're the archetype for what comes later. For them, it was just sheer sadism. A lot of people say that Columbine was a school shooting. It wasn't a school shooting. It was a failed bombing. They actually intended to blow up the whole school and just murder. They wanted to murder thousands of young kids that they went to school with every single day, for no other reason in their journals than to just see them die and to inflict as much. They really got a kick off of the idea of the lifetime psychological damage that they were going to cause the survivors, let alone some of the physical damage that some of the survivors have to deal with to this day. Same for Virginia Tech, cold-blooded. It sets off that whole trend, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, school shooting phenomena in general. It's possibly that something similar happened with Charlie Kirk's shooter, just sheer cold-blooded. Now, it seems, at least with that one, that you have someone that was convinced himself. Who knows? We'll have to wait for the trial, but it seems likely that you have someone there that convinced himself along the old Bolshevik lines that he was doing some kind of good, something for the name of the cause by killing Charlie Kirk. But who knows? That remains to be seen. That doesn't appear the case with the transgender Nazi shooter in Michigan. So full disclosure, I don't have really any particular strong feelings about whether or not Leo the 13th's vision was correct. Maybe it was. From the vantage point of December 1st, 2025, in the year of our Lord, it doesn't really seem to make much difference whether or not it was simply just 100 years. And now we're 40 some years past those 100 years, because whatever it was, something definitely happened. And whatever it was, we're still dealing with the fallout from it all. There is certainly something unique about those 100 years. I'm tempted to say it probably was related to the vision that Pope Leo XIII had. But I see it not as an isolated thing. And this is where I think, again, I don't dismiss simplified storytelling. I think it's needed and helpful in its own place and way. But I don't see that 100-year as this like, oh, now that gives us carte blanche, free license to discredit Vatican II, for example. I actually see that 100 years really if it is true, as nothing more than a part of that dark thread that runs through history. The very same evil that we see in the tragedy of that psychopath murdering innocent children as they pray at Mass, as some kind of sick troll on society, is the very same evil that we see as Pontius Pilate washed his hands. Or going back even further than that, it's the very same evil that we see when the snake first slithered into the garden. Now, what else has been going on through all of this? What happened right there at the beginning when that snake slithered into the garden? Go to your proto-evangelium, Genesis 3. I will put enmity between she and thee, you and the woman, the devil and the woman. So it was there in the garden, so it was at the foot of the cross, so it is today. And this is what St. Maximilian Kolbe both providentially, I believe, but also intentionally saw coming. What is happening concurrently? What is happening counter-currently as Satan unleashes on humanity in those 100 years? Well, says Kolbe, even before then, we see her. Her whom? She who was prophesied in Genesis 3. Between she and thee, the woman against the serpent. The Immaculate Conception is pronounced dogma in 1854, only 20 years earlier, after Our Lady appears at the monastery of St. Catherine, and she gives her the miraculous medal, a spiritual weapon, right? Hands her this spiritual weapon to give out to the world, which the church recognizes and promotes, and it becomes one of the most popular devotions in all of history. Only 4 years after the promulgation of the Immaculate Conception of dogma, we have Our Lady appearing again at Lourdes, saying to a young illiterate girl, I am the Immaculate Conception. Then in a move that's so providential, it almost defies my ability to want to read history with the eye of skepticism. It's so glaringly obvious. She appears to peasant children in Fatima, warning them of the errors of Russia. The errors of Russia that are coming, about to spread across the globe, she says. This all happens, people don't realize this today, this all happens, these children say this, before Lenin even returned back to Russia. He had lost the leadership of the Bolshevik Party. He had been exiled. The Communist Party, the extreme Bolshevik Party in Russia looked like it was gone at the very moment that Our Lady was warning these children. Nobody in the world, Lenin should have been a footnote in history. And at that very precise moment, she warns the children. A few days later, literally days later, Lenin enters the SEAL train, goes to Russia, gets off the train, seizes control of the Bolshevik Party. By October of that same year, they've stormed the Winter Palace. They've seized the control of the Russian government. Russia begins to spread its errors across the world. All of this is going on. At the precise moment that it's going on, unbeknownst to St. Maximilian, he doesn't know what's going on in Fatima. He doesn't know what's going on in Petrograd. At that exact same moment, Kolbe forms the militia of the Immaculata. What does he say is its chief primary weapon? The miraculous medal. All under the auspices of Our Lady as the Immaculata. He believed that we were entering into a new era where Satan was working more actively, more effectively, more tirelessly towards his goals of mass apostasy. and ultimately the final battle. Look around. Look around. Colby did believe that we had entered a new age of the church, but he doesn't just believe that we are left orphaned. This is a man who said, we need to be actively out saving souls by any legitimate means necessary, was what he said. Any legitimate means necessary. Do you know who else said any means necessary? By any means necessary, the Bolsheviks did. But they said by any means necessary. Colby corrects that. He actually uses the Bolshevik model in some ways, though they in many ways stole our model. They just perverted it and corrupted it. But any legitimate means necessary. So if you're tempted to think of history as void of providence, consider how and when all of this is taking place. Colby himself informing his militia of the Immaculata, it was the bicentennial of the formation of the Grand Lodge in England, the first Masonic Lodge, which in my opinion provides the strain of Western secularism, the other half of the battle that we've been fighting for the last 100 years. The one that, and seemingly here in the year 2025, has done more to capsize the Christian moral high ground than the Bolsheviks ever did. June 1717, the Masonic Lodge, first one, opens up. June 1917, the Militia of the Immaculata is formed, 200 years later to the very date. (1917). It's the formation of the Militia of the Immaculata. It's the 200-year anniversary of the First Masonic Lodge. It's the Bolshevik seizure of the Kremlin in Moscow. So we're fighting a two-front war. And I say don't count the Bolsheviks out. I think in many ways, Charlie's murder may very well have been carried out by one of its progeny. But also for our own side, the West in winning has propelled a different kind of evil to the fore. One that in many ways I think is even more deceptive and nefarious, Western secular humanism. The fruits of which I believe we saw in the nihilistic murder of two innocents in Michigan as they prayed the Mass. Just as every cop is a criminal and all the sinners saints. You know, I think about that image that psychopath drew in his notebooks. The one that shot those holy children in the church in Michigan. There was an image that he drew in that notebook where he's looking into a mirror. He himself is looking into a mirror, and there's a figure looking back at him. Who was that figure? I think that figure is the same unnamed man that the Rolling Stones were singing about all those years ago. Picture that trans man losing his mind, falling deeper and deeper into whatever dark places he had slipped into, staring into that mirror, and this figure staring back at him, saying, "Please allow me to introduce myself. You've seen my work before." So this is what we're up against. Those of us who study history, who believe in providence, who believe that God acts through history, see in this all the signs, I think, of the trouble that storms about us. And I think we see that dark thread that sort of links it all together. A thread that goes back really to the garden. I don't think you see any type of evil today that you can say is isolated from that first evil. In the short run, we don't know where all this is going. but we do know that we have some weapons. And there's an old saying from the American Revolution: trust in God and keep your powder dry. And it sounds like a platitude. It's really not. But I think what we need more than anything, honestly, this is going to be my rundown on the end here, so I don't end with you guys on sort of such a dark note. But I think it's going to be at least a generation. It's probably going to be at least 2 generations. I think if you really want to see a difference made, the thing that would probably help us more than anything else, and I truly believe this in my heart of hearts, is at least one generation. We have this generation right now, and young men and young women out there listening to me, all 3 of you. We have this thing now where you're all confused. You're all, I don't know what to do. I don't know which way I'm headed. I think we need at least one generation to sacrifice and go into the monasteries. I think we need a lifetime of prayer. And I'm not saying in hindsight, I sometimes I wish I would have been a part of that. If things had turned out a little bit different, I may have found myself in a monastery. But the church is held up by her prayers, and I think we're in a bad way right now. In some ways, we're down, but we're not out. I don't think we're going to see a resolution to this by far, at least things getting better in our lifetimes. I think things are actually going to get worse, significantly worse, before they get better. But I have hope that maybe we'll see at least one generation. I'd love to live to see it. Gen Z, I don't know. Probably not going to be you guys. Gen Alpha, maybe, who remains to be seen. One generation where we see a revival and an influx into the monasteries. And the monasteries, I think, in my opinion, and I think history, providential history would back me up here. The monasteries is what built Western civilization to begin with. And I think in many ways it could be what saves Western civilization. I don't think that you're going to see a return of families and a return of greatness and all of these things sans at least a generation of monks and nuns and religious in general praying for us, praying for the strength of the church. So that's what I got for you guys. I don't see any comments. Let me check on YouTube, because sometimes the comments don't transfer over. Nope, nothing there. All right. Well, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening. What do we got going on? I think I got one more live this month. And then I got like a hangout live around New Year's that I was going to do, just kind of a chill hangout live. And then after that, it's going to be the new year, the big old 2026. So yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying your Advent so far, 2 days in now. And continue to pray for me. And I will pray for you all. Thank you and God bless.